Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the drummer Jeff Bloom, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Famous in many ways, but mostly for being part of the television personalities, TVPs, during the 80s and 90s, and was on a lot of records, and has also had a career in music ever since. Yes, he has. But anyway, look, I'm not going to babble on about all the bands he's been in, called also the House Hunters, because he's going to explain all that in this very interesting interview. So after several minutes of casual chat that we edit out, it's a bit boring really, but it's getting to know each other. We got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. I know, it's a classic starting point.
I mean, yeah, I was into like all that kind of glam kind of stuff, and then in school, I mean, so I was born in '60 basically, so I'm 4 years older than you. But yeah, in school, yes, so when I was kind of like 12, 13, 14, friends were into things like Pink Floyd and lots of prog stuff like Genesis and Yes and things like that. I remember going to see Yes.
Actually, was this...
I grew up in Cardiff.
Oh, right. Okay, then. So was this the classic Yes years with Rick Wakeman and, you know...
Yeah.
The whole
that stuff.
And were they doing sort of Close to the Edge or Relay at that time, or Topographic Ocean?
Oh my God! Yeah, well, those things were out. Yes, Tales from Topographic Oceans and Magic all that serious prog stuff. Yeah. And then, fortunately, I was saved by the advent of punk.
Punk came and
which for me, I guess, kind of happened at what felt like perfect time for me. I was so, you know, yeah, I was sort of like 17 in 1977.
Yes.
I remember going to see The Clash in 1978. I think I saw The Clash 5 times.
God, right. So it's all about good timing, isn't it? So with Cardiff, being brought up in Cardiff, were your parents kind of have a musical sort of?
Not at all. Nope. My parents' taste in music was terrible. When we went on like holidays and things, we used to get Trini Lopez and the Carpenters on the 8-track.
Oh, 8-track in the car. That's nice. That's
and that was really about the only time they ever played music. Really, was in the car.
Right, blimey.
So then my parents were not into music at all, and so it's weird really, because my brother also plays the drums. He's been in, I think he still is in a ska band in Cardiff.
Right.
So, yeah, it's weird. I think there's probably a lot of people kind of like that, maybe, whose parents, weren't really into music, and then...
I think, well, it's kind of interesting, because my parents, I suppose, they're now in their 80s, so my dad must have been into music, because he sort of often talks about Elvis Presley and his love of that kind of period. But then being from a sort of working class background, I think when they sort of got together and when they got a house or bungalow in their case together, you know, they sold all their possessions because they didn't ever borrow money or get into any debt at all. And so, you know, we didn't have a record player back in the house until the early 70s. So, you know, I didn't know that such a thing was missing because we didn't have one in the 60s when I was very young. So it was like, oh, the record player has appeared. And suddenly, you know, we started having sort of awful country and Western music kind of in the house, which was not cool.
I remember them having a few cool things. The Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour is the one that I really do remember, like reading all of the stuff that came with it and playing. But... yeah, they music. Yeah, we had like a radiogram thing, you know.
Nice. That's really. So was your brother older or younger than you? Who sort of also?
My brother, he's 2 years younger than me.
Right. So how did drumming become part of the household? which must have pleased the neighbours.
Well, as it happens, he got the first drum kit. He bought a drum kit, and so we had a drum kit in the house, and that was when I was quite. So he must have been very young when he bought that. I guess maybe he was about sort of 13 or something when he bought that.
Yeah.
So I'd have been about 15. And I remember putting on, I used to, we had a room where we could make a noise, basically, which was good. So I would put on the Clash or the Stranglers or something with the headphones on and just try and drum along, basically.
Blimey, that's amazing. And I guess you would have seen Cozy Powell on Top of the Pops and thought, I want to be Mr. Powell.
No. I've never really been into drummers, really. I meet other drummers and they say, who's your favourite drummer? And talk about drumming stuff. And I like playing the drums, but I've never really been interested in, I want so-and-so does this thing and plays these drums. So I need to be the same as him, Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, funny enough, I have interviewed a lot of drummers, and you're right. They leave me slightly sweating because they start talking about these jazz drummers that I think I have no idea, and the style that they're holding their sticks and what their timing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortably out of my depth. I must know who some of these jazz drummers are from the 1950s with their kind of interesting styles and syncopated rhythms, and thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, as it happens, in the 90s, I did meet a pretty famous jazz drummer, and so I started doing like jazz drumming lessons in the 90s with a guy called Clifford Jarvis, who lived in Dalston, who's on all this like classic Blue Note stuff from the 60s.
Right, a nice one. Did that feel good? Was that kind of an enlightening experience? Did you suddenly think, that's what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it made me play the drums a lot better, learning that, when finally making the breakthrough of actually being able to do that kind of stuff. It's pretty hard, jazz drumming is hard, basically.
Yes.
And they go on a lot about something called independence, which is being able to use your hands and feet in a syncopated manner.
Blimey, yeah.
Which takes a lot, like patting your head and rubbing your tummy and so that sort of thing,
Yes.
And that kind of, it took sort of like, for me it was a bit sort of like riding a bike, in that I tried and just simply couldn't do it for ages and ages, and then suddenly there was a day when suddenly whatever it was clicked in my brain, and yeah.
Well, it's interesting in a slightly different way, but I've been, because I never was properly taught to swim, so I used to sort of, splash about a lot. And then one day I've had a few swimming lessons with, not really great teachers. And then I found somebody who's actually really good. And it's just like, okay, now I slightly get it. But it is a lot of work, and you just have to go through lots of pain just doing it. And then you think, actually, I've improved, haven't I? But you couldn't see that improvement until a little bit later down the line. And then it's like, actually, it does feel a lot better. There's something changed, hasn't there? But I guess it's the same with the practice and doing something that were you self-taught then to begin with?
Yes, entirely. I think, yes.
Yes.
I would just listen to, just listen to records and try and do the same thing. I think at one point someone said, you use this hand for this here and this hand here, and said and showed me, right, this is how you do a basic beat, and then once you know that, it's sort of just like variations.
Basically, you're John Bonham. You're away, aren't you?
Just sort of practice, yeah.
Just look confident. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, but Cliff got me into. I kind of practice now when I never used to practice really. When I was like playing bands, like most of the time in the TVPs, I would never practice playing the drums at home. I would just play when we played, So that would be my practice.
That sounds. So when you hit 16, did you leave school at that stage, or did you sort of stay on for?
No. I did my A-levels. I went to university,
And then
I
what?
did, I did maths at Warwick University.
Fantastic.
And
Enjoy
that's
the.
when I started playing in a band, basically. So friends, I was meeting lots of friends. We were all punks at the time. I was at Warwick because Warwick is right near Coventry. So I was really lucky that the time that I was there coincided with all the two-tone stuff happening in Coventry.
Yeah.
And so there was all this fantastic music going on, and you'd see the specials coming onto the campus, hanging around when bands were playing and things like this. And so, yeah, I started playing, in a band up there. And that's where I first met Dave Musker, who was in the DVPs, because he went to school with one of my best friends at Warwick. And so Dave would come up sometimes and he'd sort of like jam with us in my band up there. The
Yeah.
Orgasmatrons, we were called.
Oh my God, that's quite Woody Allen, isn't it? So I don't know. Was that a Woody Allen moment? Anyway, that's good. So then, after you finished your maths degree, is this when you sort of veered towards music as more of a full-time thing, or was it always a part-time sort of activity?
I guess it was always, well, it took up a lot of my time, but most of the time I worked at the same time. Although, yeah, I mean, that was kind of a bit of an issue. So I was the only one in the TVPs. Well, certainly once it was just the three of us, when it was me, Dan, and Jowe. Jowe and Dan never had jobs, but I had a job because we really, we made some money in the band, but not really a massive amount.
So because you'd gone from the sort of punk period to the post-punk world, which, everyone loves what they pretend to anyway. And then sort of, the early 80s, the indie pop world, the jingly jangly sounds that was the Smiths happened in 83. Did that tickle your taste buds at all?
Yeah, I was into a lot of that stuff that was around at that time. And I think I think we were all, you kind of, obviously you're influenced by sort of what's going on. And you can sort of see with like the sort of music that we were playing in the DVPs, it changed quite a bit from sort of part-time punks and Where's Bill Grundy Now, at the beginning, to the stuff we started we're playing more sort of through the 80s. And even as it moved on, through into like late 80s, when all that dance stuff and things were happening, and we kind of dabbled in that type of stuff.
Dabbling's a good thing to do. So when did you meet Dan, and sort of how did you sort of become part of the band?
So like I said, I'd known Dave, yes, for some time before. And a friend of mine I was at college with, he actually knew Joe Foster as well. And I remember going to see the TVPs really very early in like late 70s, somewhere in London. And and they also came and rearranged for them to come and perform up at Warwick as well. And then there was one time, not long after I'd finished, so it would have been, I think probably, I'm not sure if it was like late 82 or early 83 maybe, actually going to see them play. And as far as I remember, it was at the Living Room, Alan
Oh my God,
McGee's
the
club.
Living Room. This is the legendary Living Room.
Yep. And at that point, Mark Sheppard had left the band. So it was Dan, Joe Foster, Mark Flunder, and Dave Musker. And Dave, obviously, I knew really well. And I just went along to watch. And they'd been using a drum machine. And Dave just said, "Hey, Jeff, how do you fancy playing drums for us this evening?"
And you said,
So I did.
You were there.
And it seemed to go reasonably well. And then afterwards they said, "Hey, Jeff, we've got a gig coming up in Italy in a few weeks' time. Do you fancy doing that as well?" And so, I wasn't going to turn that down.
No.
And that was it, basically.
That was You were there because I did an interview with VRS people. There was a young German chap who went to see the TVPs kind of early on, and I think there was, at some venue and met.
Yep. Thomas Zimmerman, do you mean?
Well, that's the man, yes. And there was,
Yep.
And it was kind of this it was like the planets meeting of all these kind of amazing people who went on to do great things, but it was kind of like this, lightning striking, and sort of he starts a career in sort of booking bands across Europe as well. So,
yep.
Were you at that gig as well, or was that before?
That must have been before. But basically, not very long after I had been in the band, Thomas organised the first TVP's tour, his first tour that he'd ever organised. That was just, I think, about 8 gigs in, I think, sort of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, basically.
Yes.
I can't remember where we played altogether. And that was really quite successful to the point that he wanted us to go back. And basically later that same year, we went back and played something like did a month tour, like 28 gigs in a month.
My God, you must have learnt your craft at that stage.
That was fun. But so in between those 2 dates was when we sort of had this split and Joe and Dave left the band. So, yeah, there'd always been, it was kind of a little bit weird before that, because somehow Joe saw the band as his band, basically.
Right.
Which was a bit weird, because to me, clearly it wasn't his band, it was Dan's band.
Yes.
Or Dan had started the band and wrote the songs. And so we had a sort of bit of a row. Joe seemed to expect me to leave. At the same time. And this was about the same time as well. I guess Alan was starting Creation. So the plan was to leave and have this new TVP's band without Dan on Creation, which seemed a bit weird to me. There was one gig somewhere in Brixton where 2 lots of TVPs turned up to perform. And
that is confusing, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, but me, Dan and Jowe played. And
must have been, did you meet your, the not nemesis, but did you meet your equivalent TVP band, backstage?
Well, really, I think Joe expected. I think there was only like one other person, Joe and Dave. I think, Joe certainly expected me to play drums for him and perform. Yeah, but,
it's not the sort of situation you want to be put in, do you? Really?
It wasn't good. And there was constantly before that this kind of tension in the band between Joe and Dan about who was going to be the loudest and who was going to sort of show off the most, kind of thing.
Yes, too.
And then after that, I think it was a lot more straightforward after that then.
Yeah.
When it was like the 3 classic, of us.
The classic 3-piece. It was like the Jimi Hendrix experience.
Yeah. And Dan, I think Dan clearly, because before that point, the TVPs had probably only ever played a total of about a dozen gigs in 5 years or something like that, really. Yeah. The band had hardly ever performed. And I think really that's when Dan really started enjoying performing, and we played a lot from that point on, really.
And also recorded a lot. But was Dan also, he'd also started the record label at that stage, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Which was...
Well, at that point, it was the label, Wham, he had, the record label.
Yes.
Which he came to us, he got a letter from George Michael's solicitors saying, like, cease and desist kind of thing. And he wrote back and said, I've had my record label for longer than Wham have been around. And they paid him, we don't know how much, but he got paid off, basically, to change the name of his record label.
Yes, it was quite an amazing moment, really, wasn't it?
From Wham to, and when then Dream World started. So
Yeah.
yeah, that tour, we had one of the bands, this band on his label, the Go Service. They supported us on tour, and then I think the next tour we did after that was the one when the Hangman's Beautiful Daughters supported us, which was another band on Dreamworld, I think, and
Yeah.
with Dan's girlfriend at the time,
Yeah.
Lorna, singing.
It's incredible. You'd need to have one of those peat frame family trees really on this, don't you? Because that's because with Dan being in the doing the music and the band and then the record label, that's quite a lot of take on and also a lot of admin. Because I did an interview with a member of 1000 Violins all the way from Sheffield, and I think they used to come down to London and stay in Dan's house. And
we played a few times with them,
which were a fantastic pop band. And also, I know the Hangman's Beautiful Daughters have had their album, all their material sort of put together in a compilation collection.
A lot of
Optic Nerve Records from Preston have put that together. And that's been successful as well. So the 80s, obviously, this was kind of an incredibly creative time all round, really, wasn't it? With labels, albums, bands. So when was the first time you went into the studio and did an album?
Well, before we did an album, I mean, we didn't record an album until Privilege, but which was not until whenever that was. That wasn't until about 90 or something like that, wasn't
89, I think, yes.
89. But the first recording that we did was Love the Bomb, which was about 87, was it?
Yes. What took the band so long to record?
I don't know. We were just enjoying playing, I think, really. There was lots and lots of new material, but I don't know. We just kind of didn't really feel the need to record it. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, that would have been. I can't really ask Dan that question now, or maybe I could, and maybe next time I visit him, if he remembers.
But with albums like The Painted Word, that came out in 84. Is that because I thought that was the fourth studio album by the band, but you're saying that they didn't record anything until Privilege in 89.
Well, no. I mean, after The Painted Word, yes, there was this gap, basically, quite a long gap, wasn't there? Yes. We recorded other bits and pieces. There was sort of singles and little EPs and stuff, but not an album, basically.
I think most of that material's been probably archived now, hasn't it? I think because the other stuff like Don't Tell the Kids Just Love It.
Don't the Kids Just Love It, yeah.
And they could have been bigger than the Beatles. Is it all kind of TVPs before you joined the band?
Yeah.
Right.
And that stuff all came out in fairly quick succession, really.
Yes. And how were you, because with the kind of the great period of, the living room and the early, all the independent record labels starting, and then sort of this kind of great excitement for me, 83, the year of the Smiths. And then for 5 years, there's this kind of fantastic wave of bands who suddenly get such a platform, like the June Brides and the Wolfhounds and Yeah Yeah No and the Triffids and the Go-Betweens and the Chills. There is kind of a magical time for sort of us pop kids. Did you feel that you were part of that zeitgeist?
I don't know if we felt if we were part of that same thing. We kind of just did our own thing, really. I mean, we listened, we were listening to this stuff, but personally, I don't know if I ever felt that we were necessarily part of that same. I don't know if I felt that I was like part of something, but it was just kind of a great time to be playing. There was lots of stuff happening, and we would sometimes play with, be playing with some of these bands and stuff like that. And it was, Alan McGee was doing his stuff. We were kind of quite sort of involved. Yeah, we'd go to a lot of his things. We'd known that. I mean, I'd known Alan since I used to live in South Tottenham when I first came to London, and when he was married and living in a flat and working for British Rail.
Right, the British Rail years, a classic.
So we kind of known Alan since the beginning, and we were like friends. We'd go along to stuff that he was doing.
I'm amazed the TVPs aren't actually on that sort of the famous NME cassette, really, that Neil Taylor put together with a couple of others. But it was mostly Neil, wasn't it? Because I would have thought they would have been just the ideal band, really.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to be. John Peel you did I think the band did a John Peel session, but then, does John Peel sort of lose interest in the band during the sort of the 80s a bit?
I think maybe a bit. I think maybe when the band started taking things a bit more seriously, he liked the kind of the sort of amateurish silliness of the early stuff. I think that was his, he liked that sort of thing, didn't he?
Yes, he liked, we've got a fuzz box and we're going to use it, and Big Flame, but bog shit as well. But then when you went to do the album, had you got all the material, all sorted, and did you, because this was on Fire Records, wasn't it?
Yeah, the material, yes, all that stuff, it was all what we were playing live, basically. I mean, Dan we hardly ever rehearsed in the TVPs, so Dan would just surprise us. Sometimes he would tell us that he had a new song and it went like this, or sometimes he'd just start playing it and we had to join in as best we could. And we would kind of gradually work things out live. That's kind of how we did it, really.
Yes, that sounds quite organic, really, doesn't it? Did you feel at that stage that music was going to potentially be your full-time occupation, or did it always feel like, no, keep the day job and just keep the music kind of in the background?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was the music was the main thing in my life, really. I worked to pay the bills and stuff like that, but what I lived for really was the music that we were doing, and the sort of playing in the band always came first, really.
Yes.
So,
and were you part, because there was the sort of, having spoken to a couple of the members from the Hangman's Beautiful Daughters, they talked about the ambulance station as this kind of great big alternative nights, and early I think Jesus and the Mary Chain's first gig in London was there as well, but I might be slightly wrong. But yes, was that a scene that you were also kind of circulating?
Yes, I mean Gordon, Gordon sort of, and his friend Alvin were the guys. They're still very good friends. We're all still good friends, and we had many really wild and crazy nights at the ambulance station. It was a pretty mad place.
Yeah.
But it was a great place to play. I remember someone sharing online recently some like posters from there, from some great lineups as well. I can't think, it was one up with about 5 bands playing altogether for about £1.50 or something like that.
I know that seems obscenely. Yeah, you sort of want to go back and do it all again, really, don't you?
Yes. Sometimes, you think, wow, I'd like to. So the ambulance station was a really cool place. We went there played there a lot of times, and not just when we were playing, but to see other things going on there. Yeah, it was always a pretty wild.
And did the Australian and New Zealand bands, did you get to meet them? Because they were coming to London quite a lot during the 80s and squatting, and often I heard stories from people like the Go-Betweens and Triffids and even the Chills, sort of thinking, right, we've got to get to London to further our career, so to speak. I just wondered if that was also something that entered your orbit.
Not really personally. We had this band called the Celibate Rifles, who played with us in a few European gigs once. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No, I have not come across the Celibate Rifles at all.
No, I'm playing in another little project with Jowe at the moment, and we've got a this lady, Australian lady playing sax, and she remembers going to see them a few times back in the
Well, I have seen a
80s or
photograph
90s.
of one of the members of that, the Hangman's Beautiful Daughters, with Robert Forster from the Go-Betweens, and it looked like everybody was kind of hanging out in some sort of groovy North London scene at that time. So that's why
we might have done something. I think we might. I don't know. We might have at some point have met up with them and done something. I mean, you know.
At the time, we just thought, "What the hell?" And then afterwards, you think, "Oh, I wish I'd paid more attention." But yeah, so
there's a lot of that.
Wish I'd taken pictures. But what was your experience of recording Privilege like? Can you remember much about the process?
Well, mainly, I mean, recording was always good fun. You know, we would tend to kind of, very often what we would sort of end up with was quite different to how things sounded live. We would never really try and replicate what we did in a studio. And playing it live, there'd be lots of like extra instruments and things, overdubs and bits and pieces like this.
Yeah.
So we tended to end up with something sounding a lot more polished than we ever sounded when we were doing it for real.
Did you find a producer that could capture the sound of the band on that particular release?
Pardon?
Did you manage to find a producer that could capture the sound that you wanted for that particular release?
Well, that was produced by Phil Vinal, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes.
I don't know. I've got to say, personally, I never really saw eye to eye with Phil. Because, I always wanted things to sound natural, basically. And he wanted things to sort of sound polished and to have click tracks and everything to sound perfect. And yeah, I never felt that that's what we were really about.
So when you saw, I would imagine you might have seen it. There's been a lot of discussion, hasn't there, about the click track, especially during the 80s. And there was a film, The Wedding Present album, George Best, that came out, and there was a whole thing about the drummer and the click track and the producer, and there was a lot of issues. And I think the drummer that was when he left the band, and they got another drummer in. Did you have much pressure as that person sort of trying to keep the beat? And I did an interview with Lindy Morrison, and that sounded horrendous because she was the drummer, and this thing with the click track as well and the producer.
Yeah, well, it's impossible, really. You cannot be 100% bang on. It's impossible as a human being, I think, to do that. Really, that's the thing. And does it matter? That's the question. And I guess at that point, that was at the time when all this like digital stuff started coming along. And if you wanted to be put overdubbing stuff with sequences and things like that, if it wasn't 100% perfect, it made it, you couldn't do all of this snazzy new stuff, I think, that maybe producers wanted to be doing.
Yes.
So sometimes, so there were some, I think there's a couple of songs on Privilege where they would just like take a little bit of drums and loop it round and stuff like that and just use that, which obviously I was never, not very impressed by that, really.
Well, I would imagine you would have been insulted.
But so to that extent, it's kind of weird. I don't think that still exists anymore now. I think people have realized that that's not really what live music is about. Maybe because at the time that, like I said, there was all this new stuff with sequences and sampling and all the rest of it that they wanted all this stuff to be perfect from the sense of 100% in time, 100% of the time. There was some of that going on.
I just wondered if
which was probably why I was not seeing so sort of eye to eye with the.
Yes, well, I think there's quite a few, especially drummers and producers, having issues. So I think there was just, it's kind of only natural, isn't it? Because I think they're saying, look, let's just get, a machine to do this, because then it's going to be a lot easier for everybody, and you might be able to have it played on Radio 1. So, and then the drummer saying, well, hang on, that's me you're just talking about. I'm in the room. don't don't talk about me in front of my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think so okay. I didn't kind of know, but yeah. Well, I'm glad other drummers to hear that other drummers. I didn't know about that, but I'm glad it wasn't just me, and that there was other people facing that thing.
Oh, I
And
think
like,
they all did.
And I'm sure, like, when you go back and you listen, going back to say talking about this guy Cliff, who honestly played on some of the most incredible like Blue Note stuff of the '60s, on like classic albums with people like Herbie Hancock and Jackie McLean, famous people. And I know for certain that that music is not all completely in time. It's going all over the place, but it's some of like the, if you like jazz, some like the greatest stuff ever recorded, and no one's bothered about. Yeah.
No, well, if it's jazz and it sounds a bit off, you think it's just you don't understand it, and it must be really.
But I think so that sort of stuff was happening now. Funnily enough, I mean, I did some recording just fairly recently with a cool guy called Mark Waterman, who's worked with people like Elastica and stuff like that. And he wasn't bothered at all about. I think things have moved on again from that point now,
Yes.
where these people who want to do all these cool digital effects and things, they can actually cope with the fact that it might not be totally in time all the time now. It doesn't seem to kind of matter again so much anymore.
I think with the 80s, you might have suffered with that because there was a sort of trend towards that Trevor Horn production sort of sound, wasn't there? With really like, blimey, that's quite in your face, isn't it? And it sounds so dated now as well when you ever see those clips from Top of the Pops from 1980.
Yep.
It just
there was a couple of tracks. There's a track called My Hedonistic Tendencies on Privilege, where they did exactly this and sort of looped the drums, and it's got this kind of digital dancey kind of sound, and kind of funnily enough, we almost like never played that song again afterwards.
Yes,
it like just sort of really, it just kind of spoiled it a bit, Live music should be live. I mean, one of the things I'm hoping, Fire have started putting out loads of, having reissued, just about everything that was recorded. They've now moved on to putting out live recordings.
Right.
So this double album of like live recordings just came out recently, and I think the next one they might be planning is for the next year's Records Store Day is all radio sessions.
Oh,
so that'll be the Peel
excellent.
session. We did a Kershaw session when I was in the band as well with Andy Kershaw, and we did in America a couple of kind of live radio, sort of like they were recorded, but they were like recorded live, if you know what I mean. We just went in the studio and played for an hour, and those were sort of put out on a New York station and one in Boston.
God, that's fantastic! I'm so pleased you've got the recording still. And
well, I actually got in touch with these people called WMBR, and they said, "Oh, we've archived all of our stuff to digital," and they sent me this, I don't know, it's like 8 gigabyte WAV lossless FLAC file of the entire gig.
God.
And I have to say that's one of my favorite things that we've ever done, because it's recorded properly, it's like really good quality recording, but we're just playing live.
Yeah.
And there isn't really anything else out there that I know of that is really like that. Like I said, if I'd had my way in the studio, we would have just done stuff, recorded it as live as possible, maybe overdubbed some guitar and vocals or something, and that would have been it. And then it would have really sounded like how we sounded, because the studio stuff doesn't really sound like how we played the songs. And it's funny because everyone who knows the songs from the records, that's all they know it as. But often how I remember the songs is different, because I remember it as how we played it live hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yes,
So I have
absolutely.
quite different memories of songs.
Yeah, it's interesting. So during that period, when you were sort of back in the studio doing the studio stuff at that time, the late 80s and then into the 90s, was there much effect on the, because there was this kind of a bit of a musical shift, wasn't there? The next kind of generation, there'd been lots of different scenes in the mainstream, but there was the indie world, and then the Smiths broke up 87, and then ecstasy, and then there's this sort of dance scene, and then there's the whole Seattle grunge scene and the Pixies, and so you sort of existing during that time. I just wondered how you felt when you went to record Closer to God in '92, because this is still before Britpop sort of appeared, but you'd obviously been, well, Dan has certainly been in the band since like the late 70s. I just wondered if you'd been that kind of curious about what was happening musically, or whether that had no effect on the next album.
Well, we were kind of even, we sort of engaged with things like the dance scene. I remember going to some like raves and things with Dan. and even I remember weirdly once playing at the venue, and I was like packing up, chatting to sort of like a fan who couldn't believe I said, "Oh, I'm going off to a rave in a minute." And he said, "How can you want to go to a rave when you're in the TVPs?" And I was like, "Well, there's other stuff out there."
Yes.
So, and yes, and like I said, all that grunge stuff. I was like a big fan of Nirvana and Dinosaur Jr. and all that kind of stuff, and we all liked that kind of music too. So,
so when you
so
came
I
to
guess,
doing, I just wondered how that filtered into you, going in, writing, and then recording Closer to God.
Well, again, the writing of it happened as it. I mean, Dan would write the songs. We had all of the songs before we went in to the studio. They were, and I mean, this is all, as with all the recordings that I did with the TVPs, it was stuff that we had been playing, and we'd kind of pretty much worked out how we wanted to do it from performing live. We might change things around a bit. The only time we'd ever have rehearsals would be if we had some recording coming up. Then sometimes we'd go and have a few sessions in a rehearsal studio just to kind of work out some bits and pieces before we actually went into the.
And what was the dynamic
studio.
like of the band at that stage? Because obviously this is kind of a almost like a marriage with people, and you're sort of, plus getting older and growing up, so you're still changing a bit more than you possibly do as you get much older. So I just wondered how the three of you were sort of dealing with the dynamic of keeping it together.
It always worked really well, basically, with the three of us. There was, I mean, Dan was happy for me and Jowe to pretty much do what we wanted to do. He had his songs. Occasionally, he might make a suggestion of what he'd had in his mind when he started writing a song. But when he said, that word organically, that's kind of how things happened. And we all just got on quite easily, really. And we, you get to be, when you're traveling around for like months on end in a camper van or something like this, I guess you either end up as really good friends or you end up completely hating each other. And luckily for us, we ended up as good friends, and we really kind of grew closer, really, as things went on, I would say.
Yeah, because there's some very touching songs on that album, isn't there? There's things like "You Are Special" and "Always Will Be," and then there's also "My Very First Nervous Breakdown," as well as "You Don't Know How Lucky You Are." There's a sort of sense of melancholia sort of creeping into some of the scenes.
Yeah.
So how was that sort of coming over, with the band and sort of seeing what was slowly changing in each of you? Or
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, some of that was coming out of, Dan's relationship with his girlfriend at the time, Alison. Dan, I think, was also starting to have maybe some I don't know, like questioning everything, things sort of a lot more. He seemed to stop being, maybe showing the first signs of some of the sort of like mental health issues that he had kind of a little bit later on after, after I'd sort of stopped being in the band, when he ended up being kind of homeless and all of these things that started happening to him. It was kind of sometimes hard to tell with Dan how much he meant things, when he wrote some of these songs, like, I'm like Nervous Breakdown and Closer to God and things like that. I kind of always kind of felt that there was some sort of fair helping of irony,
right,
in some of this as well.
Yes.
But then subsequently looking back, then I wondered, since then I've looked back and wondered maybe it wasn't all as ironic as I thought it was at the time.
Yes, well, it's always tricky at the time. It's always easy in hindsight. But then what's your relationship with the band? Is this a time when you also leave during the sort of the 90s?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of that was really after. I think maybe after that the tour that we did in about 92, 93, and for me somehow it just that somehow it just kind of seemed to be just like repeating things a bit. I kind of just felt, I don't really know. I'm looking back, I kind of regret that decision really, but at the time I just thought, really, I think I just sort of came to the conclusion that really we had sort of done whatever we were going to do, really, and that maybe it was time to try something else.
Yes, and that was that. So yes, did you have to have a sort of sit-down meeting and discuss the moment that you were going to leave the band?
Not really. I just phoned up Dan and said, hey, I think there was just some things, on that last tour where I just sort of, it seemed that things, that it somehow that it didn't feel as enjoyable and as good as things that had come before. And so I thought, really, okay, maybe now's the time to leave. And I just sort of gave Dan a call and explained that, really.
And that was it. There you go.
And that was that.
So how did you then, what happens next? Because obviously you sort of still keep playing music. Did you ever go back into the band at all? Or was that the last time?
That was the last time, up until we did this benefit for Dan at the 100 Club. Are you familiar? You know about that?
Yeah.
Whenever it was. Can't think when that was now. About 4 years ago, I guess. Now
it was quite close. It was quite recent, really, wasn't it? It seemed, well, though I'm saying that, it probably wasn't. I'm not good.
But obviously, it's been. Yes, I think it was maybe about 2018. I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So was that quite a nice experience having the benefit at the 100 Club?
Yeah, that was really good fun. We actually went and we did a similar kind of thing over in Athens, and had been planning just before COVID. We were actually planning to go over to America. We got some invites. There's an indie club called Part Time Punks in Los Angeles.
Oh, excellent!
And it was going to be their, I think, 20th anniversary party. And they were going, there's going to be like a weekend of stuff, and they wanted us to play there, and we'd had some invitations to play in New York, and so we thought, hey, that would be fun. But then that was all planned for like May and June of 2019, which of course.
Would that have included Dan, by the way?
Well, no, Dan is not capable of playing
that's
music
what I
anymore, unfortunately. But I'd done lots of stuff with Jowe. I mean, yes, I've since the DVPs, I'd been in various sort of projects and things that that Jowe has done. I think I was saying with him now, I've been in something like 5 bands with him now.
Yes, this is quite something. Is it a bit of a scene in London that, you know, everyone just sort of slips into each other's kind of bands, so to speak? Is it kind of like a nice community?
Well, there's a kind of a group of people that I guess, friends and things, people that we've played with in the past. I'm doing like 3 things with Jowe at the moment. This Swell Maps thing coming up. There's this band called the Rude Mechanicals. We've got a gig coming up in the 29th. There's this like handful of several people that have been in various of these same projects. Yes, that just like people that we know and feel comfortable playing with. I guess it makes life easy.
Yes, well, absolutely. The
Rude Mechanicals.
Rude Mechanicals, because you've got a very excitable, or not excitable, but flamboyant singer, haven't you?
Yes.
I seem to get the emails and sort of have clicked on the link and thought, oh, okay. So is that one of Joel's kind of adventures?
Well, it wasn't started by him. So that project was started by the singer you've seen, and another friend, Cos Chapman. Who's a guitarist. He's going to be playing with this Swell Maps thing as well. And Steve's got another project that he does with some of those people as well.
Yes, blimey, it's quite something, isn't it? So was that with the TV piece? Was that the only kind of time you spent much, studio time, sort of recording stuff? But with all these other musical adventures, this is mostly kind of live. And
I did. I mean, there was this other project. So early I guess in like mid '80s, and I did another thing with Steve called the House Hunters, where we recorded an album and a couple of singles, and we did a little tour. Yes, with various of these other bands, I've done sort of recordings and bits and pieces as well.
My God, I've never come across the House Hunters either. This is terrible.
No, you should look. That was quite fun. I think because Jowe had a label for a while as well called Hollow Planet.
And he was he's probably sort of got a huge amount of stuff, hasn't he, really? So yes, my God. So is it the case still that you still got your sort of day job, but the music still sort of in the background?
Well, I don't have a day job at the moment since COVID. So now at the moment I'm just doing music basically,
right?
Which is why I've got lots of time, for doing stuff. So I'm happy to be doing lots of music stuff.
This is fantastic. I mean, if you could have said something to your like a 16, 18-year-old self starting out in that interesting career or hobby, I mean, is there anything that you would have just kind of wanted to whisper to them and say, look, I've got a few top tips. This is what you should sort of also
I think the only thing would have been to have to get some of it, bit more of it recorded. Like you said, like take some photos, get someone to video. There's like hardly any footage of us performing. Just recently, this stuff surfaced from, I don't know if you've seen online. I've chatted to this guy, German guy who videoed back when it was proper. You needed a proper video camera.
Yes.
A couple of gigs in Germany, and there's a gig from 80, I think it was 83, and he did another one from when we were there, like 87 as well. But the whole gig, he sent me a DVD, and that was fun to watch that because there's no footage of us performing, and so I kind of. I know now you go to a gig, everyone's there with their phones.
Much. It's just too much. I know. Well, I have realised, especially just in the last year, there's been books on, like the Texas punk scene. There's another one in Boston, punk, post-punk, new wave book that came out as well. There's lots on sort of things like the Mud Club in New York and CBGB's and Max's Kansas City. And I just realised that a lot of those places, there was just one or two really good photographers, including Kevin Cummins, who from the UK, who just went to these things, took a lot of really good pictures. Obviously, went, oh well, no one's going to be interested in the Sex Pistols on Christmas Eve in 1976, or Joy Division. But then in the last year have brought these amazing books out, and it's like, oh, fantastic! This is
Yeah.
I believe someone was there with a camera and not just some rubbish little thing, and have captured it, because that's that's kind of priceless, really, and it says so much, from what the scene was like. You can't really picture it, and the pictures of just the venue.
Yeah, well, it's amazing when you do see. Sometimes I get people share on Facebook and things photos from a gig where they took photos from wherever it was, and it is amazing how much something like that you suddenly start remembering all of these things that happened.
Do you think
we're actually Jowe recently he written a book about his time in the Swell Maps, and he's now been asked to do something for the TVP. So the two of us, we're kind of putting our heads together and trying to remember all of this stuff, and yeah, we're trying to hopefully go and to do a book about our time in the TVPs. Steve actually kept a diary on tour, believe it or not, which is pretty good. And he's got these. He showed me he's got this like box folder thing with flyers and publicity photos and just all kinds of bits and pieces from gigs and stuff that he'd sort of collected over the years. So
this is good. This is quite handy. I mean, you must be kind of fascinated. I think I'm putting words in your mouth here, aren't I? But there's these documentaries that have come out on people like the Nightingales, Robert Lloyd and the Nightingales, and obviously I just mentioned The Wedding Present. But there's been films on the Slits and Dolly Mixtures and the Go-Betweens and Chills. Yeah. You must think, God, yes, but look at the TVPs and this kind of creative one. Well, I wouldn't say genius, but very creative character. You must think, oh, that would make a great kind of documentary on Sky Arts.
It would. There has been a little kind of documentary thing on where Dan was interviewed. I can't remember who did that. I think bits of that are online. Yeah. But it would be good for someone to do it properly. I think it would be. I think it's funny. I think Dan is starting to get a bit more recognition for the songwriter that he is now than maybe we got at the time. I mean, I meet a lot of kind of young people who are in sort of bands, post-punks kind of bands.
Yes.
Current, who are fans of the band and know songs and sort of appreciate Dan. I think maybe he's starting to be appreciated a little bit more now.
Well, but I think on Spotify there was something like, was it 67,000 listens a month, which was, I thought, like, well, that's
yeah. No, I remember Alan McGee telling us, he was trying to persuade us. He said we should find a young singer that sounds like Dan and
start out on the road.
Start doing some gigs. But we have kind of contractual issues, really. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Dan signed away all his rights and everything to Fire when he was going through hard times.
Right.
And we have had offers of help. The lawyer who sued Fire on behalf of Jarvis Cocker and Pulp has offered his services because he reckons that Dan was clearly not himself really when he signed all of this stuff, and he reckoned that we could get away with that. But certainly at the moment, all money from anything to do, with TVP stuff goes to Fire, which is why I think they're so keen on reissuing everything, because it's all profit for them.
Oh, that's a bit hard, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and it makes everything really hard, and it kind of makes you feel very kind of ambivalent about all of these releases. Really, we should be all being really happy about, isn't it fantastic, at all of this stuff being put out and reissued and people wanting to buy it. But we've got this other side of things of, well, Dan's not going to see any of that money, and he's in a bad way, and it just doesn't seem right. So it spoils the whole thing, really.
No, I could imagine it's a very sort of, you want the legacy in the archive and it to be there.
Yeah.
And promoted, but
Yep.
when someone's sitting there going, "Oh, thank you very much," or "I'll go and check my bank balance. This is going very well." So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Yes, it's a shame because actually it's a good idea because obviously there's quite a few members of the band who are still obviously playing and sort of keeping it together. You just need a singer, and yes, it could be done. Look at, was it Rick Ashley?
Ashley, yeah.
He did a couple of nights doing Smith's numbers. On one level, it sounds terrible. On another, you think it's just not too bad. I actually quite like that idea. I don't think I'd go, but I know.
Well, it was such good fun when we did the the benefit thing, and it was great to meet up with to play with Dave again, and to meet up with the couple of the guys who kind of played with Dan in like the early 2000s when he tried to get things back together a bit. And we loved playing the songs,
Yes.
We really enjoy it. We get on together really well, and we have a thoroughly good time when practicing and playing the songs and performing them. So yes, like I said, we were all perfectly happy. Not surprisingly, really, with the offer of going and playing like half a dozen gigs in America.
Yes.
I mean, clearly, who wouldn't be to do something like that?
Who would take the vocal, by the way, for that?
Well, so currently Jowe does most of the singing. Lee McFadden, who he has been playing with the Cult Figures. He was playing with ATV. He wasn't in the band originally. He's in lots of bands, like old punk bands that have started doing stuff again and things. Yes. He seems to be anyway. But I quite like it when he sings, because he sings more in Dan's register.
Yeah.
One of the people who was suggested was a guy called Martin C.
No, never come across Martin C.
Who was I can't remember what his band was. He sang a song with us on that night as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alan, when we all kind of met up with Alan, like I said, yes, a couple of years ago now. And he was saying, so my God, you guys, you get all these listens on Spotify, you should go and, you should do something.
Oh, actually, I think the Very Things they have a similar problem issue with Fire Records as well. That's why the Shen never plays any of that material.
Okay.
So it's
Fire, yeah, the guy who runs Fire, Clive Solomons, is a bit of a bastard, really.
Yes.
He seems to have screwed a lot of people over in his time.
Yes, but yeah, it's a shame. And when was the last time you saw Dan? Have you seen him kind of since
I haven't been back. I need to arrange something now, because for a long time no one was allowed to even go and see him. But I think you can now. They're very Jowe did go fairly recently. You have to kind of book in advance and then have a test when you arrive.
Of course, yeah.
And because he's in this like nursing home, it's kind of southwest London.
And is he doing okay? I mean, does he? Is it kind of nice to see, to communicate with him?
I find it's hard. I find it quite hard. It is quite hard seeing him in this he's in a pretty bad way. He's got no use of his legs at all. His hands are very shaky. He couldn't play. Couldn't play. He struggles even to sort of hold a drink. He's blind in one eye, and the other eye is not great. He's got almost no short-term memory at all.
Easy crazy. Yeah,
But he does remember a lot of things, that happened from before.
yeah.
And he likes to listen. So he likes listening to music. He'll kind of like sing along with stuff if you put play music, and he can remember all kinds of stories and things like this from beforehand. But he he doesn't he doesn't look great. It's just he looks kind of old before his time,
Yeah.
and it's quite a emotion. It makes me quite emotional, but
Yeah.
when I come out from seeing him, really, because it's just seems such a shame, because for someone who was always so kind of fun to be around, and so sort of like creative and kind of cheeky, and he was like a major part of my life for a long time, and so it's hard
I would
seeing him
imagine.
how
I
he
guess
is now.
is it in the same way that people like Syd Barrett and Peter Green have like gone in this sort of just gone? Has he got that kind of similar life?
I don't know. I mean, he's not the person that he used to be, at all. There's a little, you get little kind of glimpses, but he's, yes, with everything that's happened to him, with his sort of like, the sort of brain injuries and things. So yes, he's a very different sort of person. He can't ever be how he used to be again.
Yes. Blimey. Yeah, so we have to
Pity. It's a sad situation.
It's a very sad situation.
And so in a lot of ways, though, that's one of the reasons why those of us that have played with him in the past would like to continue things and bring his music to more people, because there were so many fantastic songs that he wrote. So
yes, well, I have to say, I mean, one of my favorites, he says, having to look down. Yes, Stop and Smell the Roses. The classic.
yeah,
Got to say, it's had a million plays, more nearly 1.5 million. Yeah, I mean, it is incredible the figures that
that's funny.
It is.
So that was really good. When we did that one at the 100 Club, we had Clive from Doctor and the Medics sang that one.
Oh, excellent! Yes,
and he really did a fantastic job of it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's funny, isn't it? That I should check up. If I would be interested, I should go and have a look and see what get all the views.
Yes.
Because go on, tell me, what are the most popular things on?
Well, you get a monthly listener, 61,000 a month listeners, and the Part-Time Punks is 1.5 million. You've had Diary of a Young Man is like 1,300,000.
It's funny, but then that was used on a little bit in this Netflix series,
right? And then
so
Pictures of Dorian Gray's got 670,000 listens, and Stop and Smell the Roses is up there with 1,360,000. So that's a lot of listens, really, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It's funny why that one. I mean, I quite like that song, but it's not one of I wouldn't say that was one of my favourite ones, but
yes, I can't find it quite at the moment, but there is often a page which says where you're most popular, what part of the world is listening to your records, which is often quite amazing, because you think, oh right, you're really big in Mexico, by the way, but I can't quite access that at this very
now, funnily enough, Phil Vinal currently lives, I believe, in Mexico City.
Yeah, no,
believe it or not, he has won Latin Emmy Awards for his contributions to Latin music. I can only assume that he's not forcing people to use click tracks anymore.
Right. So he's all the so he's still happening, is he?
Yeah, that's weird. Yes, isn't it? Yes, I briefly got in touch with him a while ago, but
yeah, just say look. But forget the click track, mate. It's just not worth it. No, sometimes it says where you're most played, but I can't see it on this occasion. So that's a bit of a.
I don't know how I'll go and we should go and have a look. But yeah,
it
shows you. I mean, that's it's nice to see that people are still listening to stuff. But,
yeah, and it's interesting. Like I know Netflix and such can find the most obscure songs that kind of suddenly appear, and I've heard a few people who just were in bands where suddenly they have a record that had completely been forgotten for about 40 years suddenly appears in a Steven Spielberg movie. And
I thought it was really cool. I don't know if you've seen, there is an advert for, is it Apple or one of the Delta 5?
Right, yes. That's, classic.
Yeah, of Mind Your Own Business. And I remember that coming on, as soon as that bass line came on, I was watching TV, I thought, what?
I know. Well, you
don't expect the Delta 5 to be in a TV advert, but yeah.
But obviously, yes, it will probably be in John Lewis's Christmas advert this year, something really obscure that you think, clever. Some marketing person who's obviously in the same age group as yourself or me.
Yeah, I guess.
Thinking, right, we're going to play my favourite song, and then I'll give my notice in when everyone says that was a disaster. But anyway, they'll like it. You can go out on a high. Anyway, look, this has been fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Jeff. So yes, if you want, I can always send you a link to the interview, and you can always use it elsewhere and put it on your social media platform sites, because I'm always happy to do that. But yes, it's been great. So I'm glad we managed to sort of get a time and a date. There you go. But so tonight or this afternoon you're rehearsing for, which band is this?
This is this band called the Star-Nosed Moles. We're kind of a little bit sort of psyche, grungy kind of stuff. Very simple guitar, bass, drums. It's good fun.
And who's in the band?
I probably won't have heard of either of the other people in the band, I don't think.
That's fair enough.
No, you won't have heard of either of the other people in the band.
But it's not Jowe Head.
No, not Jowe. No one, completely different people. Yeah. I sort of, yeah.
It's good.
So that's what's been fun. But they're a bit younger than me. But yeah.
We get to that age where you go, yes, I am the oldest person in the room. Never mind, it's life anyway. But look, thank you ever so much. This has been amazing. And best of luck with the book publication. And
yes. Well, we've got to write it first, but that's the thing.
It's got to be done.
So much of it is all a blur these days, but
I'm surprised. I mean, people who've put out books recently, and there's been quite a lot. Once they start the process, it all starts coming back. So,
and we have people like Thomas Zimmerman who can help us out with, lots of,
dates,
stuff from tours and things. He always used to do these fantastic itineraries for every single day, details of, where we were staying and the venue and the promoter and all of this stuff. So we had a complete plan. We always knew where we were on every day.
Good old Thomas.
Yeah, and he never got quite as smashed as all the rest of us, so he probably remembers a bit more.
Excellent. Well, no, good luck, and yes, good luck with your gig with the Rudiment. God, I keep getting it wrong.
Rude Mechanicals. Yeah.
It's not that. It shouldn't be that difficult, should it? Rude Mechanicals. Anyway, look, have a great day and all the best. I'll keep in touch. Thanks a lot again.
Cool. Nice to meet you.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers. Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Jeff Bloom from the TV Personalities and lots of other bands as well. I know I should have made some notes as he was telling me some of his bands since that That crazy time with the amazing Dan Treacy. Anyway, look, this has been the C86 Show. I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Keep it positive, please, and nice, because otherwise I'll be sad. And also, why did you listen? That's what I want to know. Anyway, and also, all these have been archived, these interviews, fascinating as they are. And you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. That's true. So have a great week. Stay safe.